want to cover some of the types of books that you will come across in software development. There's a lot of material, there's a lot of resources out there, but it's hard to come across good, incredible books for this profession. And the first one that I want to delve into kind of represents a really good, I think, starting point, especially for SQL. So it's Sam's Teach Yourself SQL. It's the 4th edition, and it's the 10-minute version. So it's very concise, it's very thin. But Sam's Teach Yourself series of books, this one's written by Ben Forta, is a very, very good, what I would call a starting point. It's a very good reference for SQL, and I feel like it distills the information down into a very digestible length. There's a big version, real big. It's hundreds of pages. But I found this version to be the perfect length because SQL, it doesn't change that much. Some of the syntax may change, and obviously depending on what database provider you're working with will dictate the syntax, whether you're working with MySQL or SQL Server. But the core SQL, your joins, your selects, subselects, your store procedures, there's so many different things. A lot of it is the same. The principles are the same. So I felt like spending a few dollars to cover SQL in a way where I could read this in about a week was perfect for me. So I got that on Amazon. I spent a few dollars on it. The library has the full version, the big version, but reading the big one, especially reading SQL books, SQL is a tough thing to read about because it's very dry. There's not a lot of interesting stuff you can derive from SQL, in my opinion. It's hard to read. So I feel like the shorter the better when it comes to SQL, to at least get your foot in the door to learn it, and then start to branch off from there. But again, the library obviously is your best place to look for books. The library is one of the best resources that you have at your disposal that you're already paying for with your tax dollars. So take advantage of it if you can, if you live by a library. The library is always the first place that I go to look for software development books because, let's face it, a lot of books are expensive. So if you can check it out from the library for a month, I would try that. But in this case, this was a few dollars. This was a little bit older version, that's why it was cheap. And I use this all the time. I pull it out and I reference it. I've marked it up a ton. And this has been a really, really helpful and valuable resource for me that I've used for years now. I've had this book for about 3 years. And I've gone back to this book every year just because I like physical copies of stuff, so it's a little bit easier. The next book represents a little bit more, it's a little bit different than, especially from the Sam's Teach Yourself series. This one is a Packet published book, Packet Publishing, covering ASP.NET Core 5, so it's old now because they're coming out with .NET 9, but and it covers React. So obviously the information is a bit out of date, but why I brought this book up is because that this book you'll immediately see is fairly thick. It's how many pages is this? It's over 500 pages long. It covers a lot of information. It's very tutorial style, meaning it's very like follow along and let's make this thing and I'll show you the code snippets and all that. So there's definitely a place for that style of writing, but I feel like you just have to know like what you're getting into when you get a Packet published book. They're going to be a little bit more expensive based on what I've seen, but they're going to cover, I feel like, really good topics, really good information. And there's a lot of books that are published through Packet Publishing, and you kind of have to be selective in terms of which ones you go with because there's a lot available and it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So again, check the library first, but this one helped me to start my reading about React and how to use React alongside of .NET. So this was a good starting place, and I feel like Packet Publishing for me is a good starting place for a lot of topics. So if you're able to find one that's reputable and you can get it for a decent price, because some of these tick up to $50 or $60, and that's a lot of money for a book, especially if you're only using it once. It's hard to justify that. So again, check the library, but this style of book is important because it helps to, I feel like, provide you a fundamental introduction, but then it gives you enough to like start looking elsewhere for different books. And for different books, you may come across this style, which is just the traditional textbook. And obviously textbooks are very expensive. Older ones can even still be hundreds and hundreds of dollars, which is just super expensive. But this one specifically is database processing. I should say that the last book was written by Carl Rippin, and the database processing book is written by Kroenke and Auer. This book I actually used in school, covering a database class that covered relational databases. So anything from tables, indexes, normal form, first, second, third, boys cod, all that very, very dry stuff. But it covers the fundamentals of databases. But the textbook itself is expensive. But if you are hard pressed to find a book, whether it's independently published, published through Packet Publishers or any other publishers, if you're struggling to find a book that covers the topic that you want to cover, you may have to begin to look at textbooks. And a good way to find reputable textbooks is actually to look up a university's syllabus, a class. So if it's, say you want to look up a class on quantum computing, you can look up a university that offers that class, look up their syllabus, and see what textbooks or books that they use in their class. And that's a really, really easy way to get a starting point for what books are available to you for the topic that you want to read about. And it's nice because you can compare different, universities and see which books a university is choosing, and see if you can find a book that's used more commonly. And that'll help you out a lot because it kind of gives you that security to know that what I'm reading is actually what's being taught at universities. And that's a little bit more reassuring than just going and find like a random book that has no reviews and you just don't know about it. So if you come across or you find yourself in that spot, that's an easy way to find textbooks that are reputable. I haven't seen too many textbooks available through the library system. I don't think that textbooks would go into circulation as much as traditional books would. So textbooks, again, sometimes you can find textbooks at garage sales. eBay seems like the prices of textbooks are pretty high. Amazon, sometimes you can get cheap textbooks if they're like older editions, but it really depends. Textbooks are very expensive, unfortunately. So moving on to the next one. The next one is actually technically a textbook, but it's an old textbook. So this is actually from the 80s, and this is called Distributed Systems, Principles and Distributed Databases, Principles and Systems, by Seri and Pelagati. So this is part of the McGraw-Hill's computer science series of books. And what's interesting is that this was published in the 80s, and you can get them for very cheap. And there's a ton of topics. There's like 20 or 30 of these books in the series that cover pretty traditional like software development problems and things that you'll run into and still run into today. So if you're interested in reading about old, basically like the origination of a lot of problems that we still see today, whether it's data structures, whether it's how do we handle distributed databases, how do we handle database locks, and anything like that, you can go check out old books like this that you can get for pretty cheap. And honestly, that'll still be helpful for you today. So again, you probably won't see these style of books go through the library, but you can get these online for cheap if you find them. So again, the computer science series from McGraw-Hill, it's a pretty interesting resource if you're interested in checking that out. The next one is not a textbook, but it's from McGraw-Hill, which is probably, it's probably going to be a good book if it's from McGraw-Hill, a pretty respectable publisher. You can see I marked this one up a lot. This is Web Scalability for Startup Engineers. This falls into the category of you may just have to spend the money to get this book, because I haven't seen this book in the library. It's very popular in its niche that it serves. But it's a little bit more on the pricier side, so you may spend $30 on this. But I think it's worth it in my opinion. This is one book that if you're trying to decide on whether you should get a book through Packet Publishing that's going to be $40, $50, or $60, or spend the money to get this book from McGraw-Hill, I would probably go with this one. So this one is by Arthur Edgesmont, and it's very, very good information. It covers it covers a ton of detail, a lot of topics in great detail for system design. And it's one of these books that you may just want to make the investment up front to get early on and just read it and study it. And again, I haven't seen that book go for very cheap, but I think it's worthwhile. And books like that, I think that there's a time when I feel like it makes sense to check a book out from the library. But in this case, I would seriously consider getting or buying Web Scalability for Startup Engineers because of how valuable I think of a book it really is, and I think how helpful it will be in your software development journey. The last one is not from McGraw-Hill. It's from Packet Publishing. And it's a first edition from, who is this by? Trevor Williams, Effective .NET Memory Management. So this book is interesting because I've read another book from the same author that I really liked. And this book is very, very new. So I think it was .NET 8, and it goes into memory management in .NET, which is a hard topic to talk about. And it's very hard to find information that's been condensed into a form like this. And one thing I'll say about Packet Publishing is once you find an author that you like, it kind of is fun because you can really, it's because it's not just about the book, right? A lot of it comes down to the writing style. How is the information being presented? Is it being presented in a way that allows you to learn? And Trevor Williams is a very good author, and he's probably one of my favorite authors through Packet Publishing, or that uses Packet Publishing to get his books out. I really like his books, and this is a new one, so it's going to be a little bit more pricey, maybe $40, $50. But in this case, I got it with kind of high expectations because I liked his other book, and I really, really like this book too. So I feel like once you find an author that you like, I would say, make sure you keep a tab or keep a bookmark of that author to see if they're ever publishing new books. Because once you find an author that kind of resonates with your learning style, then I feel like it's way easier to stay up on information because you know that you'll probably like the book that's coming out. So it's fun to find an author that you like, and especially that covers topics that you want to learn about. And in this case, Effective .NET Memory Management was an extremely valuable resource to me. And I just read it last year, and I plan to reread it again. And it's just very, very good. So I would highly recommend this author, Trevor Williams. I would highly recommend both of his books in .NET. And yeah, but again, that book is super new. It's not going to be in the library system for me. I had to buy it new because there were no used copies. And so there's a little bit of a risk when you buy brand new books because there's no reviews. You can't buy used copies, and you just have to buy it new. So you kind of have to say, am I willing to spend $50 on a book that I don't know if I'll like? So, but if it's coming from an author that you liked in the past, you'll probably be more inclined to buy it. So for me, that's why I went with it. But again, it's kind of it's reading software development books is no different than reading anything else, right? Once you find an author that you like, you'll probably keep reading their stuff. And software development's no different. And so, I don't know, it's kind of fun once you figure out the author you like, the publishers that you like. And, I should say that I didn't even include a book. I should have included a book actually from Manning Publishing. Manning Publishers is my favorite publisher for software development books. I've said that on the channel many times. They consistently just have very, very high quality books, but they're a little pricey. They're pretty expensive, and the library system for me has a lot of Manning Publishing books, which is good, but not a lot that I would want to read about. So they only had one .NET 1 It won it for React, so it's pretty limited. And Manning Publishing is expensive, but it's high quality stuff. So if you're interested in what I would consider to be the best publisher for software development, check out a Manning Publishing book, because they're every one that I've read, and I think I've read four of them from Manning Publishers. They're my favorite. They're the best books that I've read in that category of book. So very, very good. So once you figure out the publisher you like, once you figure out the author and the topic, I think you'll be in a solid starting place to really learn a lot of information. And it becomes fun because you're like, whoa, I didn't know about this or that. And I just like reading books way more than documentation, because let's face it, documentation is so dry. It's not exciting to read, and I need something to hold, right? I need a book. I don't want to read online. I don't want to read a screen any more than I have to. So let me know what books that you've all found, or if you have any author suggestions that you would recommend, let me know, because I'm always on the lookout for authors, or maybe a different publisher that I didn't bring up. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.